Well, it's that time of year. This is the fun time of year. Everything online, social media, the deer hunting search and information is going through the roof right now, and it's time to plant food plots, the late summer food plots. And these are fall plots going in, and every year I release my best food plot blend, best food plot mix, and it's 2019 best food plot mix. And I'm really excited this year because not only do we have the mix, this is something I keep perfecting since the mid-90s. So I'm working at this all the time, and of course I'm recommending and building food plot systems around the country for dozens of clients a year. And this is the best I have for this area. And we'll talk about that in a second, because this is something that hits the wheelhouse of a lot of my clients. And I'm talking mixed ag, doesn't matter if it's 20% ag, 80% ag, whatever it is, some type of mix. And this is the best mix I've come up for this, but that might not be the blend for you, and I'll talk about that in a second. And I'm gonna talk about what we're doing here, because if you look at this food plot, this is planted, ready to go, and we'll carry this into fall. And I'll explain what method we're using in a little bit. This is a blend that has worked extremely well for this area. This is a blend that I can plant and count on to hold deer, attract deer, protect bucks, advance them to the next age class, and oh yes, give us an outstanding hunt, because we have a herd on here that is food focused on these food plots every afternoon about an hour before dark, and then they release off to the ag land around here after dark. So we can, think about it. Deer have a very short window of movement during the daylight. Mature bucks around in this ag area, 200, 300, 400 yards, 95% of the season, every day, daylight movement, that's it. They go from their bedding area down to food to bedding area. That's it. They really don't move that much. Even during the rut, for the pre-rut, they're here. For the peak rut, a lot of the times they're here because they're chasing does. This is their home range. So you can have multiple mature bucks focusing on a small area of food plots, a small property. 30 acres is 30 acres of cover here. My new property up north, 25 acres of cover. The property over here is 8 acres. So you can have a food-focused herd, dedicated herd that pays attention to your land every day of the season, all season long, and you do it by offering a diversity of green. And that green is the base. Now, maybe in times of corn, it's not the same draw as corn in November. If you have a lot of harsh, cold weather during December, then maybe it's not as good as beans at that time. If you have an early bow season that starts in September, maybe it's not as good as alfalfa or beans at that time. But if you rely on beans and corn, for example, there's huge holes. For example, if you're only relying on beans to come in December, where are the deer in September, October, November? You didn't establish any pattern of use on your land. You didn't hold any deer. And you had a great hunt in December, but that's after all, your neighbors got to look at those bucks. This blend right here, similar to a lot of my blends every year, 100 pounds of peas per acre. You can go over on the peas. Easy to go over on the peas. A standalone pea planting is 300 pounds per acre, so if you put out 150 pounds, not a big deal. 40 to 50 pounds of oats per acre, and that's max. I want those oats to offer a nice cover crop for the peas that are coming in. You can't do that with wheat or rye. What I like about the oats is they die out over the winter time. They're not very hardy. As soon as you get frost, they stop growing. Doesn't matter how warm it gets after that. They start to turn yellow over 3 to 4 weeks after they get that first frost and die. So a great nurse crop and a great young lush crop to begin establishing the use of the plots with 100 pounds of peas per acre. You can go over on that. I wouldn't go over on the oats. And then at the same time, I'm adding 25 pounds of beans per acre. I had Northwoods Whitetails seed company, John Comp. He mixes up my seeds every year for me, and he mixed up this blend for me. It totals 175 pounds per acre. Sounds like a lot. We're only doing that on this half of the plot, on one half of all our plots. And the idea behind that is starting around the end of July, early August. We have moisture in the forecast, so we're looking for that. But I want to begin establishing the pattern of use on these plots the end of August. Not May, not June, not July. I don't want summer fawning here, although we have a few, but we don't have the bulk of the herd. I want to invite those deer onto this land in September and later and hold them until January and February at least, and that's what we do every single year. Been doing this for years, And that's the blend on this half that we plant. I want the deer to focus on this half because I just planted brassica over here on this half. It's a brassica blend. Now on that brassica blend, John helps me out with this too, but I cut the brassica blend in half per acre. So instead of 6 pounds per acre, 3 pounds. And then I added 7 or 8 pounds of tillage radish, mixed that in with it, which is also a brassica. And I put that blend in over here. The reason for that is I want that tillage radish to dig into the soil, deposit that radish under the soil level, and then that's free nitrogen next year when I rotate these crops. Just rotate them every year on half. This blend will go there, brassica blend will go on this half next year. And that's it. So I want the deer focusing on this, the young peas, young oats, and young soybeans. That's all candy for them, while this brassica takes root, establishes, and grows volume. I want the timing of this brassica over here, I want the deer to start hitting it end of October, not mid-September. And I don't want them to wait till January, which they never do, especially when you have a hot planting right here that features a lot of candy crop and peas and beans. And then natural for them just to step over and hit the brassica when it's the right time. If you're having trouble with deer hitting your brassica at that end of October, mid-November sweet spot, then add 25 pounds of beans and 50 pounds of peas within that brassica mix. That'll sweeten it up, get them to establish it earlier. But do not plant brassica in this plot, peas up there, beans over there. You want it all in the same plot. We separate them 2 halves. And then on this half right here with the peas, beans, and oats, then I follow up around Labor Day, which is 4 to 6 weeks after your initial planting. You know, it's June 20 or July 25th maybe right now, or 23rd. Down what, Dylan? I don't know. Yeah, we don't keep track of the dates. But anyways, it's right around the end of July. So a Labor Day planting of 200 pounds of winter rye right over the top of this mix is an awesome addition and necessary addition to this. Because just when those deer, when these beans and peas are picked through, the oats are getting a little bit older around Labor Day, I don't want the deer going over to that brassica yet. I want them to hit that young, lush, low base of winter rye that is the workhorse for this food plot, and that'll be green all the way through next spring. Big difference from oats. Oats you use as a cover crop, use as a nurse crop, and then they die out. Great nurse crop for clover, alfalfa, chicory, bird's foot trefoil, whatever it might be that you're putting in. Oats are a great nurse crop. But if you're experiencing a lot of frost and freezes in mid-October and beyond, oats die out. You don't want to have a brown food plot of oats going into December, which is what takes place in a lot of the northern states. So think of oats as a nurse crop, cover crop. That's about it. I want full green all the way to early spring, and the rye is the workhorse. People ask, why not use wheat? Rye germinates down to 37 degrees soil temperature. Rye germinates in the porous pH that any food plot variety can grow in. Rye is much less discriminate on soil. It'll grow in sand. It grows in the back of my pickup every year when it spills. So I want rye. Wheat is a lot less discriminate, is more discriminate on soil, more discriminate on pH. You want higher pH for wheat. You want heavier soils, good soils. And rye will beat wheat in overall volume, growth production, speed of growth. And it doesn't matter if there's a nutritional level difference of 1%, 5%, whatever it is. I mean, you could argue rye is the workhorse. Rye works anywhere. That's why I recommend it a lot. It hits the sweet spot of the most hunters in the country. And that's why I use rye over wheat. When do I use wheat? I use wheat when I can't find rye. So if I'm having a shortage of rye, I can't find it in the area, then I use wheat. No big deal, especially when I've addressed the soil concerns. Use wheat with good soils, good pH. Rye with bad soils, any soils, low pH, low fertility levels, light soils, heavy soils. I see people, it's the same argument online. I see people say, use wheat or oats or rye, use one or the other. It's no different than Norway spruce or white spruce. Norway spruce is for good soils, high pH, heavy soils, open sunlight, full sun. White spruce you can grow back in the shadows. White spruce is a great addition to a lot of hinge cut bedding areas because they can grow in full shade. White spruce is less discriminate on pH and soil type, and can grow in sandy soils. It's prevalent in the northern areas with poor soil and sand. Same argument. People say Norway spruce is better, white spruce. They're both spruce. They just have different conditions. Same with oats, wheat, and rye. Knowing they're a good addition, it's a great addition to this half of the plot. Clover, or the brassica blend right over here. Now I have a new property this year, and this is a different food plot blend. It's brand new food plots. They just went in 2 days ago, and I'll be planting mid-August. We'll get that leveled out, cleared out. There'll be some weeds then. We'll knock it back down again. And I want a variety. I'm planting tillage radish because I want to improve the soil. Also, tillage radish it takes a lot more competition than say rape or turnip. So tillage radish is a lot more aggressive. It's a more tubular plant and it can take a lot more pressure. Also, 50 pounds of oats on that. So I'll have the oats and radish planted early. And then I'm going to add 10 pounds of Northwoods Whitetails clover blend because I want that clover base going in through next year to establish the pattern of the utes of the plots next summer. So I know that the whole deer herd in the area finds those plots, and then I might end that clover the following year. And there's a chance I'm actually selling that land. So whoever buys it, I want them to have this nice lush clover crop going into next spring. So that's partly it too. Different focus there. And yes, mid-September, 4 weeks later, I'm going to add the 200 pounds of winter rye, because even if the clover doesn't grow, the oats don't grow, that rye surely will grow. And that tillage radish isn't too far behind the rye, so that might still grow too. But it's all about putting back into that soil with the tillage radish, the rotting husk next spring, fills with water, closes, expands the soil, works on soil compaction, and that leaves that nitrogen in the ground too. So different focus on that new property up there. Planting on light soil, some soil concerns down there. So I'm planting a super blend there, adding the rye for assurance. And you can do that with any plot. If your plots fail this year, just throw 200 pounds of winter rye, 300 pounds of rye if it's closer to October, 200 pounds if it's closer to Labor Day, and enjoy the season. It's great, food plot safe. Now, how we're planting this. This looks like garbage out here, right? Isn't this pretty soil plot? Well, I'm using my Ultimate No-Till blend and Ultimate No-Till system that I developed in the early 2000s, end of 90s, right around there. I first started using rye, buckwheat rotations, and I quickly found that, hey, that standing buckwheat, like right now, we look down and you can see the seed in the buckwheat when we push it away. So I seeded into the standing buckwheat. We want 7 to 8 weeks on that buckwheat before we plant, which is we're right in that timing window right now. We had some weed concerns in some areas that we'll continue to address, and they'll be taken care of. So we had some lower growth buckwheat in portions of this, but that was still okay. And you can even see the brassica seeds down in the buckwheat. The buckwheat is stalky. So now that we've crushed it down, there's a lot of open soil exposed around here, but that dead, decaying buckwheat and weeds will lay on top of that seed and act like mulch, no different than putting straw out on your lawn. In fact, I've actually planted a lawn like this up in the UP in Michigan. I've planted just about every seed blend that you can think of other than corn, and I'm sure corn would work too. No need for corn this time of year, but we put the beans, the peas, the oats, and the brassica into this. You can see it now into that buckwheat when it was standing. And then we used our Packer Max behind the ATV, smashed it all down. You'll notice if it's taller buckwheat, it crimps and smashes very quickly. It just breaks right over. It's like bending a piece of metal where you bend it this way, that way, and eventually breaks. We bent it down, and then I went back around this plot the opposite way, and everything smashed down. And then we added 2 quarts per acre of glyphosate on top of it. That'll take care of all the weed concerns in here. A lot of those weeds were shaded out because of the buckwheat, especially where it was more mature. And we'll be left with a bunch of dead debris here. That buckwheat's not going to pop up now that we sprayed it. And it's an incredible seed bed that we held moisture with, that we competed with erosion. Coon Valley flooded again 3 or 4 days ago. Really bad, flooded into some of the houses. It's still flooded. Terrible erosion. We didn't have erosion on this field because we had that full growth of buckwheat here. We also didn't have to till this up. There's a lot of moisture in the soil right now from recent rains. Even if we didn't get rain for a few days, you can assuredly that there's going to be a lot of germination here. Also, it acted as mulch over our seeds, and with that big root system that's in the ground, we're putting a lot of nutrients back into the soil. So we're not disturbing soil, we're not drying soil out, we're not really opening these plots up for a chance of erosion. And by the way, then we get some great food plots this fall. That's my 2019 best food plot mix, favorite food plot mix, the best blend I can come up with right now. That fits for this wheelhouse right here. You might be in a northern setting where there's a lot of woods, a very few deer. You only have a few acres to plant. You'll find if you plant something like this, they might eat it down to the dirt before the season even begins. That's where I developed layering rye many years ago. You can look up layering rye for whitetails. It was developed in the UP of Michigan in the early 2000s. I did that because I wanted to put 100 pounds of rye down in mid-August. And then I put 100 pounds 3 weeks later. And then by the end of September, I'm putting the third 100-pound planting of broadcasting rye. Again, you just throw the rye right on top of the soil. It'll germinate. You don't have to worry about tilling, disking, roll it in or anything at that time. I layered because I wanted to get a lot of seed to fill space this way, not this way. If you plant early with a huge amount of seed, it fills space this way. Your crops get too old, the deer don't like it, becomes stemmy and dormant. They compete against each other. What I want 100 pounds this high, 100 pounds this high, 100 pounds this high. So you have that low, lush sod base going into the hunting season. And that's a way that you can compete with overbrowsing in a northern setting where there's no other food for them to hit, so they end up hitting it 5 times a day. We expect them to hit out of 5 times, about a time and a half here per the day, meaning they hit at the afternoon food source, they go out to the ag fields, they might hit it on the way back a little bit in the morning, and then they're feeding in the browse up in the hills up here that we've created for them, and that's what you want too. That's my best blend. I'd love to see you guys try it this year. Check out Northwoods Whitetails. They have some high quality blends with no frill, garbage, other stuff that you don't need, like a ryegrass or something like that. And they're just good, solid blends. You can call John Comp, talk to him. He's really helpful. And I've been actually using his seed blends for, I think, since 2012, right around there. And it's 2019 now, so it's been a long time. Actually, 2011. I used it at that time too. So it's been a while. I hope you like this blend. I hope you guys have great food plots this fall. Even if you don't plant this exact blend, think of the concepts. Think about having green all the way through the end of the season. If you have enough green, maybe think about adding corn. If you have enough greens and corn, then maybe thinking about adding some beans. But I want you guys to have great plots this year. That's the lowest hole in the bucket, is a blend like this, covering all your bases. And I know if you plant it and work on this diversity, look at 2 halves of the plot. How can you give the deer something that's always there throughout the season, so there's different forages peeking here and there. And while you're at it, make sure you have some of that rye in it, weed if you can't find rye. And that'll make sure that you have green all the way into the spring green up. Once spring green up hits, they'll ignore the wheat and rye, but it's great for pre-spring green up for 3 to 4 weeks. And this is that blend. This is a blend you can use. Check out the Ultimate No-Till Planting. You can look it up on YouTube, on my site here. And I wish you the best of luck with your food plots this fall and this deer hunting season.